So I want to introduce Kirsten Han. She is a freelance journalist who runs the newsletter We the Citizens, covering Singapore from a rights-based perspective. Her work often revolves around the themes of social justice, human rights, politics, and democracy. And her bylines have appeared in The Guardian, The New York Times, The Washington Post, and Foreign Policy. And personally, I love Kirsten's observations on the media space. She's an incredibly astute observer of where journalism is headed and how funders and support for newsrooms affects that. And so that is one of the reasons that we're very excited to have her moderate this panel that we have today, because she's going to have great questions and observations for us. Kirsten, you want to take it from here?
Yeah, thanks, Ariel, for the introduction. And because this is a short session, I think we would just get straight to it. So apart from Ariel, we also have Courtney, who leads a collaborative year-end fundraising campaign to increase the operating revenue of newsrooms that are members of the Institute for Nonprofit News. So through Newsmatch, Courtney works closely with newsrooms and funders to advance the business model for nonprofit news. And we also have Christina, who is a senior director at the International Center for Journalism, and also the founder of Agência Lupa, the first fact-checking initiative in Brazil. And so today what we are talking about is how funders can support media organizations in fostering membership, experimentation, and success in their newsrooms. And so I think the first question that I'd like to start with, just to throw it open to everybody, is how do you think funders should approach their relationship with the media organizations that they support?
Who wants to start?
Hi, everyone.
Start, Christina?
I think I can handle that. I'm sorry if I'm echoing. My house is completely empty. I'm moving in. So good morning to everyone. Nice to be here. Nice to be invited. Wonderful to be with such amazing brains. So to your point, Kristen, I think the first thing that funders need to understand is what point is the initiative on? Are they starting? Are they on the growth period, or are they in success level and can offer different things? Because sometimes when you are helping either journalists to launch an initiative, or journalists that just want to grow, or journalists that just want to maintain, so you have to match the interest from funders with the need. So I'd say that this is the first question funders needs to ask: what stage are you at? Right. So and be very clear, because sometimes journalists just want to say, oh, we're doing this, this, and that. But actually, the idea is really tiny and small, and you don't need to sell yourself bigger than you are. And sometimes it's the opposite. Sometimes journalists go, oh, I'm not that big, I'm not that nice, but then you are like super high level, working so fine. So I mean, would be the first step to take, I'd say.
I think that's a great point. And a membership puzzle project, I think one of the things that we saw, especially between the first iteration of the membership and news fund and the second, and we made some changes in the way that we offered support, is the importance of being able to adjust the support for where the newsrooms are, investing the time and effort to build a bench of trainers that can offer very tailored support to the newsrooms. It's very efficient to take all the newsrooms through the exact same course at the same time, and it might help the newsrooms get to know each other. But the newsrooms, as Christina mentioned, are all at such different stages, and one newsroom might have a marketing expert on hand, and so they don't need support there, but they need support on community engagement. And another might have incredible engagement skills, but really need help with the user experience and sort of the mechanics of their checkout flow. And so every newsroom has opportunities and skills gaps within their teams that are different. And so tailoring the support as much as you can, and investing in building that bench of trainers so that you have them on hand to help newsrooms each time they encounter a new sort of hiccup, I think is really key.
Yeah, I think to just build off of the things that Christina and Ariel shared is the fact that when funders think about funding journalism, they oftentimes will focus on the content itself, will focus on the reporting and the output, because that's where there's such a direct line of sight to their impact, right? When you cover great stories. But I think that it's a two-sided coin. Newsrooms honestly need a lot of support and help just running the business of their operation. And funders, if they want to see the impact in journalism, that it's also important to consider ways to support things like launching a membership program or expanding their membership program, things like hiring development staff or investing in technology and resources that are going to help to sustain the work that they do. And I feel like more funders are beginning to realize that the business model needs to be supported as well. But I think there's more that needs to be shifted just into investing in the business operations of newsrooms.
Yeah, I think just the point that Ariel brought up about how it's efficient to bring everyone through the same sort of program. And I think those ones are really helpful to get to know other people who are running media startups and things like that. But sometimes when it's too much of a generalized program, it works the other way because you end up comparing where you're at to other media organizations without necessarily realizing that you're not in the same place. And then you just feel like you start to feel really bad about yourself because how come everyone's doing so much better than me? And actually what it is just that everyone's facing different challenges and that's not necessarily coming through in a big generalized program. So I think that's a really good point, that if it can be more tailored, that would be much more helpful. And so maybe Courtney, if you wanted to talk a bit about how you've been doing things at Newsmatch and how that helps with the different groups.
Sure, yeah, Newsmatch it's one of those general programs. We serve about 250 to 300 newsrooms through a national matching gift campaign. And the campaign, what we do is match the dollars raised in membership donations and small donations to these newsrooms during the final 2 months of the year. All these newsrooms are nonprofit, but there is such a wide range in the newsrooms we serve. Some are startup, like Christina said, what phase are they in? We serve newsrooms that are on all three phases. And in addition to the matching gift campaign, we support them with training and resources that help them to run their campaign, but also with the hopes of really adapting better fundraising practices that can be applied all year round. And we ourselves feel the growing pains as the field grows of the distinction and diversity of needs. I think it's spot on to think about how we can better tailor and tier or build cohorts within this larger group of newsrooms so that people are getting what they need. I think to Ariel's point, one of the things that we are doing to sort of be more specialized is actually rely on more peer-to-peer exchange. So allow newsrooms that are further along to be talking amongst one another about how to run their campaign, or newsrooms that are led by persons of color to talk together about unique challenges or things like that. So I think we're really relying on a peer network to provide that specialized support, but we see that as a huge need because people are entering the program at different phases.
Yeah, that peer-to-peer learning is, I think, so important. This is something that we did in the second iteration of the Membership and News Fund that I wish we had thought to do in the first. It's an idea we actually stole originally from the European Journalism Center's Engaged Journalism Accelerator, these sort of very casual community calls where everybody that is sort of in the program, it's optional and you can join in. And in our case, we chose not to record them so that people could really feel comfortable sharing what was and wasn't going well. We did take notes so that people could catch up after if they couldn't make it. And each of these community calls, we either organized them around a topic that was very relevant to membership that we knew from talking to the coaches. Everybody was sort of working through. For example, one of them was audience research and another was sort of like customer service for your members. Or a newsroom could pitch an op to talk about a work in progress, something that they were sort of working through. And Christina's organization, Agencia Lupa, actually led one of these when they were in the process of designing their membership program, but they hadn't decided yet. They brought their sort of draft of the membership program to one of these community calls and shared it and collected feedback from the other members. And so having that space that is not recorded, that is not meant to be shared outside of the community, I think is a really great way for them to work through some of the same challenges, especially because we had two newsrooms who were focused on fact checking who were launching membership programs around the same time in two different countries. So they weren't competitors with each other, but they were working through a lot of the same questions. And those community calls became a great place where I also learned a lot about what we should be recommending to other newsrooms as well.
Yeah, and so Christina, if I could ask you, like when you were at Agencia Lupa, what were some of the things that you kind of wish funders knew when you were trying to engage with them?
Oh, that's such a good question, Kristen. So let me tell you a bit about Lupa. Lupa was launched in 2015, and we were only 4 people, all journalists. That's a big, big, huge mistake. And I learned it the hard way. And right now, I wish I could go back and, tell to my, the guy who could put money on Lupa at first, say, hey, besides a journalist, can you also support a finance person, a legal team, a small legal team, and a designer? So, I totally agree with Courtney on thinking that, funders are, Lupa is a fact-checking organization, and my funder really wanted to know what's true, what's wrong, what's true, what's false. And he wanted us to, say that out clear. But, you do need a base. When you're in phase 1, you do need to have people that have further knowledge than just journalism. And this is something that funders do not like, because it's not really something you can see outside. But when you go and some of the programs I have here at ICFJ, for example, I'm thinking Velocidad, it's based on Latin American organizations. It's quite clear that when you add somebody that is thinking business, thinking finance, thinking human resources, thinking marketing, then there's a boom. So I really wish we could explain that very clearly to funders. Hey, sometimes it's not about just journalism. We do know we can do it, but for us to do this, we have to step aside and let somebody else do the other stuff. Because in my first year, Kristen, in Lupa, I wasn't writing anything. I was dealing with bank. I was dealing with, legal papers. I'm like, what? Where's journalism? And, that's so tough for those who are starting. So I wish funders could understand that deeply and be fine in supporting your finance person or supporting your designer, while you do your great journalism.
One thing I'll mention on that finance question that we ran into at MPP is it's really important to be flexible about how people plan to spend their funds. Of course, when the newsrooms apply to the membership and news fund, we ask them to propose a budget, how much money they need and what they would spend it on. But almost all of our newsrooms ended up halfway through saying, actually, we realize that we don't need to do much on this, but we need to move money over to this. And so I think making it a really permissive space and creating a space where they can say, we think we got this wrong and we'd like to move that money over. It's a very small thing, but it was really helpful for our newsrooms. It's a little bit more difficult on the legal side, but it's worth investing in making it possible to change plans about how the newsrooms spend money.
And on just what you just said, Ariel, I think, Kristen, there's another topic. Funders would profit a lot if they helped journalists to engage in studying, in education. Sometimes, you just need, there's this huge reporter that doesn't know a lot about marketing or doesn't know a lot about audience engagement. So I would appreciate very much if funders kept that in mind. Maybe if you are not only thinking about the final product, but also on people, then that's a big thing, because it will come, the big product will come in a bit.
Yeah, I think these are such important points, and I've had similar experience in Southeast Asia when, before I came out to do freelancing again, I was co-founder and editor-in-chief of New Narrative, which was a Southeast Asian media startup. And one of the frustrations that we often had talking to other media startups in Southeast Asia is that there are a lot of funders who would like to fund projects, but very few who actually want to fund operations. And you end up applying for funds that, because they are project oriented, actually get you starting up new bits of work that you weren't originally necessarily gonna do. Like, okay, now I have to start this project. So you have to find someone to do this project, to like build this website. Or there would be funds that were aimed at like innovation. So like, how are you going to use AI? How are you going to use blockchain? What other tech are you going to use? When media startups are struggling to keep the lights on. And it's just like, no, we don't need funds to do a new project. We need funds to pay an accountant so that payroll keeps getting paid. And this is a lot of the problems that we used to have, looking at, like, not looking at specific funders, but just looking at that whole ecosystem of, okay, what can we apply for to get help? And that was very often the struggle. And so there are now some questions in the Q&A section. There's one from Kathy, who asked if anyone on the panel has any advice for a very small nonprofit newsroom that's part of a larger not-for-profit organization. And so the larger organization is only willing to invest in the publication in a limited way, but when they try to apply for funding elsewhere, their financials are kind of skewed by the larger organization that they sit within. So would you have any advice on how to deal with something like that?
Courtney, this might be a good one
Yeah,
for you.
Through Newsmatch, we have a number of organizations that are either fiscally sponsored or they're organizations that are smaller properties that are part of larger, education institutions and things like that. And it is very, very challenging to demonstrate your fight. Your property's budget might be relatively small, but when you apply to grants, they ask for the legal entity. And Newsmatch, we actually do the same thing. I think some of the thought around this could be is make sure that you're distinguishing. I'm going to steal from a session that Ariel recently led, what your unique value proposition is of your property that is very distinct from the larger parent organization, and be able to make that distinction really clearly in any of your proposals. I think if there is, some grants or opportunities for funding might limit your organization based on size, and there just might not be a way around that. I think that if it continues to become a long-term problem, I think it's actually time to connect with your parent organization. And if you're embedded within their organization, what resources are you underutilizing that they might have? Like, do they have a broader development staff? Are they pursuing grants that maybe 15% or 20% of the proposals that they're going for might be valuable, could actually come to you, and maybe you guys can pursue funding in joint ways as a portfolio. And I think long-term, in the early beginnings of an organization, you might, in your first 1 to 5 years, be a sub property because it's helping you stabilize. But at some point, you do have to think about your business model. You do have to think about your opportunity for growth and success and make hard decisions if it comes down to that. So I think that a lot of organizations are in that situation, and you're not alone in that. We definitely see it through Newsmatch. The other thing I wanted to share was just recently about the challenge of unrestricted funds is that another thing that funders can think about is also offering implementation grants. So I think funders it's really important that funders see the return on their investment. And when they're making an investment, they want to be able to see the impact. And sometimes when you invest into the operations of an organization, it's hard to trace how that money made a difference, if it's just paying an accountant, for an example. So I think that one way to think about this is through implementation grants, and for funders to think about not necessarily what are numerical returns on investment, but what capacities were generated, and what capabilities and what knowledge was gained through their investments. And I think another way to reduce that risk is to fund a large group of newsrooms in the same way, like through Newsmatch, funders put up matching funds to support operating revenue and unrestricted, and the funds are unrestricted. Newsrooms can use them however they want, but their return on investment is by positioning it as a matching gift. They only release those funds if small donors also join them in giving to the organization. So they're able to see the impact of their investment, but still award unrestricted funds.
And so if anyone has any other questions, we can put them in the Q&A. But otherwise, I had this one other question that very often when funders, or particularly with grant funding, not so much investment funding, but grant funding, they do make it clear that we are not going to fund you forever. So like you go into every sort of grant funding with a sort of understanding that has to be an exit plan at some point. So how do you think it would be best for funders to work with the media organizations to make sure that they are ready for that sort of exit, rather than a lot of the times I think everyone has in mind that the exit is coming, but no one actually really knows what's going to happen once you get there?
I think I can take that. So yes, I think this is something that really happened to me, and I feel that I faced a investor who was actually testing me. He said, "I'll give you money, but you will fail." So that is a very intriguing, depending on the personality of the person running the program, it will bring you down. Depending, it will bring you up. It brought me up, said, "I'm going to prove you that this is going to happen." So, I mean, this is very tricky, and I hope funders don't have that. You know, I'll help you, but I think you will not succeed mood, and it's quite common. To minimize that situation, I would say something I did not do is have a very close relationship and a schedule of, you know, this is what's going on, and making sure that you have, let's say, 100K, and suddenly it goes to zero. That's bad. You have to decrease the amount over months, weeks, years, whatever. So, you know, you are pushing the business that you're running towards a sustainable business, right? And I'd like to comment on the other question, Kirsten, if I may. I think what we have to do here is to have a very clear situation in terms of how do I put it? Forget it. I'm gonna rephrase my head and come back just a second.
I think at Membership Puzzle Project, this is something that we thought about a lot with the membership and news fund. And when we talked to the newsrooms very early on in their work with us, one of the things that many of them said they had challenges with is sort of long-term planning, having a roadmap that they could stick to. And so that was one of the reasons why we structured the venture support as sort of their coaches were their accountability partners. And they met every 2 weeks, and that sort of helped them keep on track during the venture support, which lasted 5 months. But then as it was coming to an end, we also started hearing from the newsrooms, this is really abrupt. Like the 2 week intervals just end. Where do we go from here? And so we're lucky that we had a little bit of extra funding that we could be flexible around, and we were able to give them 2 more sessions with their coaches anytime over the next 2 months, anytime over the next 3 months that they could schedule sort of whenever they hit a roadblock, or maybe they needed help getting back on track. Which we're really happy that we were able to do that. And the other thing that we are offering that I think will be really helpful is they're having a session with the News Product Alliance on how do you maintain momentum on your goals? What sort of meetings should you put in place? What sort of check-ins should you have in weekly meetings or quarterly meetings? What is sort of good goals hygiene, and how can you restructure your meetings to make sure that even when your coach isn't checking in with you and helping you sort of overcome those little bumps, how can you sort of maintain progress on those long-term goals that you have? And it's not something that I, as the person running the venture support, thought about when the newsrooms came to us over and over again and said, we're concerned about our ability to stick to the same timeline that we've been able to stick on when we have coaches. When they came to us with that need, we were able to sort of design the venture support and throw a few more things into the mix to help support them on that. So I think that that's not a membership skill specifically, it's a broader skill that any newsroom needs to have. But I think listening to the newsrooms as they approach their endpoint of the support to figure out sort of what gaps you can fill is important. Sort of being able to listen to the newsrooms and the anxieties that they maybe have with the support ending is really important.
Okay, now I have my head cleared. I'm just mixing between Portuguese and English. Sorry for that. I was thinking about what Courtney answered, and I think you can always leave the main organization. This is something that you should keep in mind. It happened to me. Lupa is something that came out of a big newsroom in Brazil, and the newsroom didn't want to spend that money, didn't want to give me people to work with me, and and I said, hey. So I'm out. You have to be brave enough to say my idea or this initiative is good enough to be independent. And my second advice to the person who asked that would be, maybe you should look for funding that is for small communities and small initiatives. They exist. Even though you have this big brand behind you, probably maybe you just need a individual grant just for you and for your 3 partners, and you can get support during X time, and then maybe you will leave the main company or main organization that's not willing to help you that much.
And just I think the last question before we run out of time would be, just now, Ariel, you were talking about, kind of tapering it off and checking in. So where is the line then between how much reporting is too much reporting? Because there are, media organizations that say, the grant reporting process is so onerous that we practically need to like hire a grant person to just do grants, apply for grants, and then report on grants, and that's all they do. And we end up having to raise money to pay them as well. But then at the same time, it's also important to kind of check in so that you know that you're offering the right support that's tailored. So how much is too much, and where is that kind of sweet spot that we're looking for?
I think it really depends on, I'm gonna say it really depends on the funder. I think the idea behind it is if you look at it like a relationship, you want to keep people informed of the things that they care most about. Some funders want those, they want to know every other move, other funders, they want to know at the end of the year because they themselves have busy plates. I think it's always fair to ask a supporter, how would you like to stay informed of our work? They might say, please don't waste your time and send me a 5-page report every month. Use that time to do your journalism. They may say, could we have a meeting? I think in this case, the best thing is to ask because every funder is going to.
Yeah, I think that point about sort of please don't give me a 7-page report. That's something that we have said to the newsrooms that we support as well. At the end of their project, they fill out a Google form. It's like 10 questions. I think it probably took no more than 30, 40 minutes tops. And the goal there was that we were working really closely with them over the course of the 5 months. And then more importantly, we were talking very often with their coaches. And so we sort of expected the coaches to give us regular reports. We had monthly meetings with the coaches, and that took the onus off of the newsrooms to constantly be checking in with us. And it also, I think, put a little bit of distance to address that power dynamic of newsrooms feeling like they have to sort of perform for funders or only talk about the things that are going well. And so we didn't check in with the newsrooms regularly. We let the coaches sort of keep us apprised of that, and then did that very simple sort of reporting at the end. And I think that sort of speaks to something that we really believe in at MPP that I'd love to see more organizations do with programs like the Membership and News Fund, is really build a community amongst your coaches or trainers as well. We invested in the coaches and trainers, and we had monthly calls with them and set up so that they could also help each other, because they were often encountering the same challenges in the newsrooms that they were coaching. And so it's not just about supporting the newsroom, but it's also about supporting the coaches that are working with the newsrooms that you're employing to support them.
And my only tip on this, if I may, is reports shouldn't be that hard if you keep data. I mean, this is more like an organizational plan. So every time you have something that you think will be or should be in the report, make sure that you put it in your Airtable, put it in your shared folder, in your Google Docs, start building it, because I do understand that reporting might be tough and might take forever and ever, but it's also, that also happens because we weren't that organized. And I feel that this is like basis. How are you going to report? And every time you see something, just save it in a safe place, so you just reach out fast.
Yeah. So thank you very much for all that. I think that's really great what MPP has done with the coaches, because I think that also takes the pressure off, talking about your startup and the problems that you might be having, because sometimes when you meet the funder, it's very like, you feel this pressure of like, don't say anything wrong because we still need them to fund us next time. But I like that idea of having that community of coaches as well, because that also then invests in the education, as Christina said. And I think we're just coming to the end of this session now. So it was a really quick one, but thank you everybody for tuning in. I'll just hand it back to Ariel.
Thank you so much, Kirsten, for joining us. Kirsten's another person that's really pushing the time zone spectrum here and calling in from Singapore. So Kirsten, thank you for staying up for us.
Thank you.
And Courtney and Christina, thanks so much for joining us as well. Christina in the middle of a move, so we're very appreciative of that.
Thank you.